Hi, everyone. This is Bernie with E&T-TV. Today, I'm going to interview Brian O'Reilly. Brian is the MBA coordinator for Vietnam German University here in Vietnam. I'm going to give you a quick introduction of Brian's credentials, his experience, a little bit of background on Brian. Then we're going to talk about the recent past, what happened recently in what life was like before the coronavirus pandemic hit. Then we're going to talk about what life is like now for Brian, how he's adjusting to the new normal. Then we're going to talk about the future. We're going to talk about 6 months, 1 year, and even 5 years into the future, and get Brian's take on what he thinks things are going to be like. We're also going to talk about some opportunities in the future, as well as some Brian's call to action, what he suggests that education and training professionals should do to help themselves professionally, to help the profession in general, and to help the world at large. So, without further ado, here we go with the interview with Brian O'Reilly. I'm going to start by introducing Brian O'Reilly. Brian is the Master of Business Administration Program Coordinator at Vietnam German University here in Vietnam. He has an MBA. He's also a project management professional. He is a director and the former president of the Australian Chamber of Commerce. Brian has over 18 years, let's just go ahead and call it 20 years experience here in Vietnam. He has seen, I'm sure, some amazing changes and this country grow in leaps and bounds. So, Brian, begin by saying thank you for taking your time and joining me in this interview.
Thank you, Bernie.
Okay. And Brian, we've given you professional background. I know you spent a lot of time in Australia, a lot of time in Vietnam. Any quick anecdotes you want to talk about as far as what it was then and what it is now?
You mean in Vietnam?
In Vietnam, yeah. A quick one. Just a.
What are the differences? A lot more high-rise buildings. The traffic has got worse. We've moved from bicycle to motorbike to motor car, so you could say more pollution. And that's on one side of it. On the other side, of course, the economic growth and the standard of living for so many people have grown dramatically. So I always use the Pareto principle. For the 80% of the positive, you have the 20% of the negative.
Okay, right. That's good.
While we have nostalgia for the good old days, the reality is before coronavirus, these were the good old days in Vietnam, the modern days.
Right. Yeah, that's it. And that's great. That's a great lead into what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to begin by talking about the past, and I don't mean a complete history of education and training in Vietnam or in your area. I mean a recent history, what life was like a couple of months ago. Then we want to talk about what it's like now in the middle of this of this situation. Then we want to talk about the future, what you think some trends will be. What do you think will continue after our adjustments, what different technologies we might continue to use moving forward, different techniques, skills, learning theories, etc. And then we want to have maybe the most important part for the people paying attention to this interview. And those are what possible opportunities will arise from this for professionals in education and training. And most importantly, I think, is given your experience and your qualifications, training, etc., what you think we should do, what the best thing we could do for the profession, for ourselves as professionals in this industry, what we can do to make it a better situation at the end of the day. So let's talk about the recent past, the recent history. So let's talk about maybe November, December 2019. What was, before we knew what was going to happen, what was a day in the life of Brian O'Reilly like?
Well, I mean, it was my office is up near the airport, so it was basically a traditional day. Was you went to the office, you were planning out the whole year ahead. You were organizing classes in a traditional setup, because in the MBA, classes are on the weekends, Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday. We were planning for our lectures, some flying faculty to come in from our partner university and Leipzig University. So basically, we were just having traditional, modern traditional way of doing things. So there was some talk about online learning or blended learning or whatever, but it was basically face to face in the classroom. And so when I was talking to lecturers for the MBA program, that's what I was talking about doing. I also do a little bit of lecturing myself. So basically, for me, it was, well, I'll just I will just organize and go to those classes when I have to. So we were all, how would you say, sitting blissfully ignorant of what was going to come in a couple of months.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of us were. I mean, there may be, I would say, 0.001% of the world could see this coming, and they were people who were dedicated their lives to it. So, blissfully ignorant might be a good way to assess it for most of the world. So you mentioned that you were doing it. You were doing your education in a traditional sense. So what tech tools were you using mostly pre-corona? And I mean, when I say tech tools, I mean, I mean, anything from Microsoft Office Suite to language learning management systems? What were some things that you were using before that? Before this came about?
Well, what I've used, I'm not saying I've used it in the last year, but I'll start with what I was using, we'll say, in November, December. Obviously, I've used Google mostly, so I was using Google Office Suite, So basically all of that. Apart from our online, our Google Cloud platforms at the university, I use Google Drive. Things like PowerPoint, which is obviously Microsoft, and it was just traditional sort of ways of communicating. As a matter of fact, the communication was basically either by email, face to face in the classroom, and using some Skype calls, because obviously I had to deal with Germany. So basically, it wasn't that much. In other places before that, obviously, I used things like Blackboard and Moodle as well. But with smaller classes and that, there wasn't really that much need for it. So I always found that I could just set up a platform on Google Drive or folders, and the students had access to everything there. And there was, well, I will say something here because it's become very obvious. We are all the time talking about the digital age or Industry 4.0, Education 4.0, but the reality was we weren't doing that much about it, although I did talk to some of my colleagues and I said, we should be looking at online learning to see how we could improve what we're doing. But there was whilst we knew this was going to come, we didn't see the import. It wasn't that urgent, and especially in sort of business classes, maybe for English language, online learning was becoming a little bit more used. But certainly, and I'm moving ahead here, one of the things we learned was that we have all this technology that could help us improve how we deliver our services to our customers, but we weren't really using it that much. Other things they used was some project management tools. Like obviously, I've used Microsoft Project with students who are doing projects, or what was the other one? Reiki is another project management tool. So we were using some tools, but basically not looking at it as much as probably we could have been in hindsight.
Oh yeah, and that's That's kind of I agree 100%. Considering my perspective, you know, doing my coursework, getting the MS Ed in education technology, and with an emphasis on distance learning. I had conversations in December with leaders of education institutions, and they were, oh yeah, we're not really going to do anything online. We're not going to, and now everybody is, oh, we're doing everything online. And you're right, and it's not something that we want to say that it was. You mentioned earlier that, you know, blissfully ignorant, and now we could, you know, arguably say that, you know, hindsight's 2020. Maybe we were also, not to be negative, but we were a bit ignorant and lazy. We didn't. It was we thought that it would just eventually phase in or feather in, and then all of a sudden here we are with this situation. So you kind of touched on my next question, which is what we were doing, the two different sides of it, what we were doing well in education before, and what were some issues facing the industry. You kind of touched on some issues, but I wonder more specifically, what were we doing well before the outbreak? What in your opinion were a couple of things that we were doing really well before that we can that we could use to move into the now?
Okay, I think some of the things that we're, you know, one thing was the sort of looking at education as to include the soft skills or transferable skills. So one of the big issues, which is separate from this virus thing, was the lack of work-ready graduates going into the workplace. So I think what we were doing, you know, like I had any classes I deliver, I try and get them working in teams, doing research, problem solving, decision making, presenting. So you not only have to have the knowledge, but you're an understanding, but you have to have the skills to be able to use it. So I think I don't know if it's the correct term, applied knowledge was one thing where students had to either do case studies or real life scenarios and work on things that actually mirrored closely what they're doing, what they would be doing in the workplace. Also working with industry, getting, you know, things like internships or working on projects with industry, found that was working quite well. So I think there was a big shift from just going into a class, memorizing, being able to do an exam, to actually being able to undertake assignments, individual and group assignments, where you could demonstrate that you had the knowledge and understanding to apply this stuff in real life. And I think that was happening. Quite a bit. I can't speak for a lot of other institutions, but that was the sort of move we were having, and industry liked it, and of course the students prefer to have how would you say, practical classes, hands-on classes, rather than boring lectures.
Yeah, that's a great point you make. The human component, even though you use technology, the human component is still, you know, we're still working with other people. We might not see them in person, we might see them via camera, but you still need to have etiquette in place. You still need to know how to negotiate. You need to know how to communicate and to you know, come to a consensus. And I agree with you. That's great. And those same concepts apply in digital formats or in-person formats. So great insight there. So what were some things that you think were facing the industry before the outbreak that are now? And you kind of mentioned earlier a bit of complacency, a bit of, we'll do it tomorrow. Is there anything else you'd like to expand on, aside from a bit of getting behind the ball a bit? What do you think were some issues that were facing the industry before the outbreak?
Well, I think the how would you say, the link, and I've covered it a little bit, but I think you know, especially in the area of business, the main thing is to get people ready to be able to go in and work in business or engineering or whatever it is. So again, I won't go into it in any detail, but there's a gap between what industry needed and what universities were delivering. And that was a big thing. And I think, you have, I'm not taking the side of universities, but, industry has to realize that until somebody actually works there, as we all know, you can't have all the skills that you need to be work ready. But we could have a lot more. And then, of course, universities and lecturers in universities are under a lot of pressure to deliver a lot. And while these things are very important, in some cases their time and the resources are not there. And I suppose the other problem is, whereas I'm a sort of have a foot in both camps in industry and education. Unfortunately now, and there's a lot of emphasis on PhDs and research, and a lot of these people don't have any practical experience in industry.
True.
So that is an issue that needs to be looked at, is how can you expect somebody to teach you how to become a marketing expert if they've actually never worked in marketing in an organization?
Yeah, true. It's getting to somebody. Yeah, it's cart before the mule. You've got to have the experience to understand the ins and outs of it. But by the same token, you also need to have the study. Maybe that'll help. Maybe we'll have a little help overcoming that now, or not. We'll have to see how it plays out. So let's talk about the present a little bit. Okay, so a quick overview. What are some things that how has this impacted your work? Well, let's start with, you talked about earlier, 80% positive, 20% negative as far as change in the country as a whole. How has the recent developments, how have they affected your work positively and negatively? We can start with the positive and then go into the negative after that.
Okay, well, funny enough, it's actually been a lot more positives than I would have expected.
Good.
So of course, one of the things is, I mean, I'm lucky enough, I've got a home office here, so I've got all my technology, I've got another, one of the good things is that with all of the technology, we can communicate at a distance. The potential is very, very good. So it was just a matter of learning how to use it. Like we are holding this interview now.
Correct.
And I think, for me personally, and I may as well go practical, I said in my MBA program, I've got people delivering online, so that's under control, is good. But I offered to do a module for another program, and for a couple of reasons. One, I could do it, and secondly, I thought, well, Brian, online learning is going to happen, so you may as well get in and do it.
Right.
So whilst the material and everything else, I had stuff I've done for 20 years, so there was no
correct.
But I wanted to look at and say, well, can I get in? Can I deliver an online class with close to the same effect as face-to-face? Because the outcomes of the students getting the knowledge and understanding and some practicals is important. So
you make a great point there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you do make a great point. And this is the goal of online learning, is not to be better than face-to-face, but to be as good, to have the learners come away with the same level of education. You don't want any drop off. You don't want to say, oh, well, it's an online education, it's less valuable than the face-to-face diploma. What's the goal of online learning is to make the knowledge transfer the same in both situations, Uh, that's okay. She closed the door, but um, that, it's all right. That's a good point you make, and I just wanted to make a quick interjection there. But that's interesting you bring that up. So please continue.
Yeah. So with the first class, I didn't really know them. I hadn't met them. So of course, one, I had to come to terms with the technology and using the technology. So basically, I'll give you the technology. Just, I mean, I'm not saying because it was a small class and I wanted them in teams because it was a project management rules. I used Skype and I could split them into teams, into smaller groups. It was quite good. In that way, I could move from the classroom to teamwork to individual if I wanted to. I also used Google Drive so that I set up folders for the class, for the teams, and actually set up individual folders as well. So one of the benefits of that is I can say to them, guys, that's your document. I want you to populate that document so I could see what they're doing in real time, actually. I
a bit of accountability there.
Yeah, and this was a big advantage over traditional. What I also did was they used a couple of different project management software tools as well. So we were using quite a chunk of technology. And I think it's important if somebody's watching this, and I'll try and cover it all as best I can. So I did do a practice session with a couple of colleagues to iron out a few difficulties, so that when I started with the students, I wasn't, I actually set up a second computer with a second Skype ID so I could see what the students could see. So when I'm looking over here, I could, oh, hang on. That's not what the students should be looking at.
Nice. Nice. But that might go in the negative category.
Oh, no, it wasn't. It was actually just a contingency. So basically, it was just a risk management thing. So until I got really familiar with it all, after a while, after the first day, it became irrelevant because I know how to use it.
Right.
What was very important was to make sure the students were aware of the technology. So I told them in advance, get used to using Skype. The project management software, you have to, in your own time, you can go to the website, you can sign up for it. There's lots of stuff on YouTube. Because I didn't know the students, it was also building a rapport. So I did spend a bit of time with them, getting to know them, and because it was their first online class, was to explain to them, guys, I will give you lots of support. And so, the students are worrying about this, worrying about that. And actually, last week, you will smile about this, I told them, if I see something wrong, you don't have to worry. I will be contacting you. So if I am not knocking on your door, you don't have to worry. And then I thought, I actually got Bob. I give them the Bob Marley song, Three Little Birds. Don't worry about a thing. Now it's a little bit humorous, but it was also very important to make sure that they were not panicking, because
correct.
I'm aware there was no face-to-face. And until they got to know me, I was a stranger. So you have to be aware it's not only the technical things and everything else, but it's coronavirus is scary for some people. People might be worried about it. So you've got that worry. The environment has changed. The world has changed. So as a leader and as a lecturer, you are a leader. It was up to me to make sure that the psychological part was taken care of, where they could feel comfortable and know, guys, if you turn up every day and do what I'm telling you, and I will provide you support, then things will be okay. One of the big positives was, and it's already, I see it here, is that, as I explained to them, I'm not going anywhere. So I'm working from home. I'm on my computer every day. So just because the class is finished doesn't mean that you can't contact me. If you
Mhm.
can, everything is online. I can check it. And even this morning, before I had this interview with you, Bernie, I had 3/4 of an hour with one of the teams just going through their
Mhm.
work. And
Right.
so you can provide probably a lot more support because you don't have to worry about the physical presence. So to
Right.
me, it was trying to make sure that the outcomes, the, what the students should achieve at the end of the module are achieved as closely as possible to being in the classroom. And I think that takes a bit of thinking, in the sense that you have to sort of imagine, well, what would I be doing in class with them? And how can I mirror that as closely as possible? And that's why when I split them into the teams, I could then go and talk to teams. So when I would finish a lecture and I would say, okay, I want all the teams to go off and do come up with some answers. And then I would go and have my cup of coffee, and then each team could come back and present, and we could have discussions.
Mm.
And and we, I found that I was a lot more impressed with online learning after
Mm.
using it than I would have thought. I mean, I'm talking about a small number of students. If it's 60 students now, I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, well, 60 students in any class is ridiculous anyway.
It's difficult to manage. You need help with that, I would imagine. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
you could have a traditional lecture. One of the things that I'm thinking is recording the lectures. Now, I didn't do that in the first module because, to me, the
mhm.
most important thing was delivering to the students. But I'm starting another one this weekend. So what I'm thinking of doing there is saying to the students, listen, what I will do is I will go through this unit. It'll be 3/4 of an hour, but I will record it, and that way we can keep a record of the lectures. But because if you're recording everything, then you've got discussions and this and that and the next. So you've got two choices there, and is maybe to record the lecture and just have it, or to record outside, or to record it when you're delivering it. And I thought, well, I'd say to the students, let me just go through it all. Then we'll have activities and exercises. But afterwards, you can go back and listen to any section of that lecture. You can. Another thing I think what technology can do, and this can, some of this can be used even if we go back to traditional or some type of blended learning, is that the students can write in all of their, I can say to them, well, here's a document. Fill out any questions you've got on that document on Google Drive. And what I can do then is I can go in and look at that document and answer all of those questions,
Mhm.
separately. And then I can say, okay, here, guys, here is the recording of me answering all those questions. So that way I can relax, answer the questions, give it back to the students, and then if there's still any questions, we can do it online, or in real time. But it's very early days, and it's a matter of looking at, you try it, does it work? Great. If it doesn't work, well, try something different.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's this is a difference between what you're trying to accomplish and what in my situation. I started out 100% online, asynchronous with my master's program, meaning that there were short recordings to guide us, but everything is project based. We're given some group projects. We're given individual projects. The professor points us to the information or the education that is relevant to our assignments and to our projects. But I've never had I've had conference calls with instructors, with administration, but not about my coursework, about other issues. So I went into this knowing that it was 100% online and asynchronous. I was mentally prepared for this, but your students were used to face with just a smidge of maybe a few conference calls. So you've got that, and it's for you as well, is you've got to transition from that mindset of being in a classroom and being face to face and having that intimacy and duplicating that intimacy with technology. So that's another component I hadn't really thought of before, and it's interesting to see how you manage it. So one quick thing, what were some things that you were concerned about, or sorry, how has it affected you negatively? You've made a lot of really positive comments. Give me one quick example of something that you think is, one of the developments that is negative, one of the things that has hindered you, if you will.
I'm just talking, I'm focusing on the actual class that I delivered. For me personally, as you know, I'm slightly extroverted. I love
a little bit.
yeah, a little bit.
Like me, yeah.
Yeah, I feel that to be in a class, to be able to go up to students, to talk to students, and have the highest form of communication. It's not a big negative, but it's something you have to be very aware of, that's missing. And
yeah.
So we'll say the intimacy of having the class, the students right there in front of you, where they get to know you, that's something particularly you need to be careful of. And I think that's why I spent a bit more time with these students at the beginning, to build up some sort of a rapport, but it's never going to be the same. So for me, even if you're doing blended learning, to have the first class together, would be a big thing. So the students, we all get to know each other.
I agree with you 100%. That's been one of them. I'm very happy, very fortunate to be for so long. That is one of the main drawbacks for me. Like you, I'm an extrovert. I like to socialize. I like that component. I like to see people and maybe going to give the shaking hand for a while, but I like to see people interact, and that's been the most difficult thing for me to overcome in online learning, is that act of face-to-face. Big thing. I understand 100%. So let's talk about motivational strategies. You talk about managing this change. Oh, you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure.
Maybe it's because I'm clipping. Maybe I'll move this mic down a little bit. Is that better?
No, it seems to be.
Let's see. I'm on 5G. Yeah. How about now?
No, the picture is frozen.
Oh, now it was frozen for you, but it's back now.
Okay, I can hear you, so we can keep going.
Okay, all right. This is so what? Let's see. So you talked about what you were using before. You talked a little bit about Skype and whatnot. Is there any other technology that you've started using now? Anything that you weren't using before that you are using now? Any new tools? If there are, what are your favorites and why do you like them? User interface, is that a thing? Is it the ramp up on the technology is fast? What are some technologies that you're using now that you weren't before, and what are your favorites and why do you like them?
Well, as I say, for a small class, you're back now 100%. For a small class, Skype worked perfectly well, and one of the things I was very aware of was, it's my first time, it's the student's first time. I don't want all the bells and whistles. I want something that works. And it did very well. I haven't, the other one that I have used is Zoom. That's more for industry stuff, but even last night I had an Australian Chamber of Commerce board meeting on Zoom,
Hmm.
So I've used Zoom quite a bit personally and professionally, and I think it actually is quite good as well. And it's um, there's something about security, but I think that's been sorted out now. That if you're using Zoom, you can't get in. You put a password in, and unless you've got the password, you can't get in. So
Yeah.
there are other ones, but to me, to me, to me, and this is a recommendation from myself, is to have a look around at the different ones and then see which one, which one best suits my style, or even more important, which one would I believe would give the best outcome to the students. Now,
Mm.
funny enough, my next module that I'm teaching starting on Saturday, I know these students well, so I don't have
Hmm.
to introduce myself to them. So we have all, the face-to-face stuff is already there. I had them before, but they're
Okay.
all business information system students. So
Perfect.
so I'll be tapping in on their expertise and saying, well, guys, what do you think is the best and why?
Mm.
So I don't have enough, I would just say, experience to be able to say to you, Bernie, that this is what I recommend, blah, blah, blah. But I do
Right.
have enough experience to say to people, do your homework and find out what works. Because different types of classes, different sizes of classes, age groups of students, etc. Not one system fits all. Um,
Right.
what I would be, and I think this would be important, and my advice out there is, for the students' sake, maybe lecturers should use the same system for the students. You don't want the students going from Zoom to Skype
Right.
to whatever other one, to Google Classroom or something. So I think it would be important that the students, as quickly as possible, end up using a same platform, or same few platforms. But
Yeah, you
again,
bring up an interesting point about that. I do see a lot of people, as this expression goes, is herding cats. They're trying to get everything under one roof, and it's difficult because you haven't had the planning around choosing the technology that you're all going to use. So you talk about, you're using Skype, you're using Zoom, we're using Google Hangouts, and all of those, if we're using them for video conferencing, it's kind of redundant. But nobody had a chance to prepare and set up and say, hey, this fits our need the best. We're going to invest in an enterprise subscription. We're going to use it university wide. This is what we're going with, right? So everybody right now is kind of scrambling. We're going to use Zoom for this meeting. We're going to use Skype for this one. We're going to use Google Hangouts for this one. There's a lot of that kind of bailing out the lifeboat that's happening now. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I hadn't really considered that you might have a class where you're using three different video conferencing solutions, and maybe one person likes it, the other person doesn't. It's hard to get uniformity in times of crisis, right? I mean, you're just going to use what works. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Which is one more thing about the present I wanted to touch on before we move on to the future. Are you okay on time, Brian?
yep, yeah.
Okay. Um, Motivational strategies. For example, I'm really big on the ARCS model of motivation, John Keller's ARCS model of motivation: attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. I try to incorporate that into my lessons. But one thing I have heard a lot of people mention is it's difficult, even though most adult learners are intrinsically motivated. They're there on their own free will. They're taking your class. They're paying for your class, or they're paying for whatever instruction it is, or their company's paying for it. They're motivated intrinsically to be there and to learn. But with online learning, I find it, and they understand the relevance. They know why it's important. But getting attention in an online environment is really difficult, challenging for a lot of people, especially with kids. But we're not talking about kids right now. So, what are some motivational strategies, some learning theories that you might use to to bring your students in and to really get them to get them to learn, to transfer knowledge?
Well, in recent times, anyway, most of mine are graduate or postgraduate students, so they are adults. But even with undergraduate students, I talk to them about the importance of real learning. So one, I explain to them, guys, I can give you not only the knowledge and understanding, but skills that will really help you in the future. So I say to them, it's up to you. It's student-centered learning. You need to take responsibility for your learning, but I will provide you with everything. If you have got the attitude that you want to learn, then I'm here to make sure that everything else is supplied to you. So I do talk to students a bit, particularly younger students, about the importance of this is not just about a piece of paper. This is about your ability to perform in the future. And if you shortcut your way through your degree, when you go into the workforce, it's going to be obvious that you've shortcutted your way through the degree. So I think a little bit about that. Now, with adult students, you don't have to talk about that so much, but I also like to talk to them about the relevance of what they're doing in the workplace. So with project management, why are projects important for people studying how to manage factories? Well, there's a lot of projects in production. People, oh, hang on. Well, if you're setting up a new machine, that's a project. Your normal production may not be, but if you get a new order in from a client, a customer, that's a project. So the next thing you began to understand, oh my God, I thought we were doing production. There's actually a lot of project work involved here. So, so a lot of it is to educate them on the relevance of what they're going to be. Well, that's what art is, the relevance of what they're going to be doing. And then from the how would you say, it's to deliver it in a way that is interesting, but also gives them the knowledge and skills that they can use. So that if somebody finishes my project management module, if they have a project to do in a factory, well, then they can actually use what they've learned in this project. They're not going in with zero base, and they've actually helped a couple of teams do projects in a real factory afterwards. They were my students in project management. They went to this factory to do this work, and I was providing the technical guidance from a project management perspective. So they could see, well, actually what Brian was what we were doing in Brian's class is very, very relevant actually in a real life scenario in a factory. So I think at the beginning it's to sort of make sure that they understand why it's important, and also to deliver it in a way where they can actually they can see that this has been of real benefit to them. And I talk to them. I always use the I try and get them away from rote learning, and I say that at the very beginning. I say, you don't have to memorize anything in my class. I am not going to give you some test that relies on memorization. I don't believe in those. And it's also to help them to learn how to learn. Even this morning, I had students talking about, well, an executive summary. And I said, Google it.
Exactly.
I said, it's not, I'm not here to teach you how to do executive summaries, but I said, people don't know. The answers are usually there, but they don't know how to go and look for the answers. So sometimes it's the old saying, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And I said to them, listen, if you have an executive summary written in the next couple of days, I will look at it and I will give you feedback. I said, and you can improve upon it, but I want you to try first. I don't want to spoon feed you. I want you to try, and then I can give you feedback, and I will make sure, if you're doing the work, I will make sure you've got a professional executive summary at the end.
Yeah,
but I don't
it
want to
doesn't have
write
to
it
be.
for you.
It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be a checklist. I mean, there are
yeah,
deliverables, of course, but you know, the deliverables are all, for the most part, you know, the concepts transfer. Different methods
yeah,
you might use might still reach the ultimate goal.
yeah.
You know, you make that point. Google it, and I use this often. This example often in my coursework and in my projects, or in anything. You know, when I have to an assignment, I lean on this guy. But he's amazing. Julius Yego, the Kenyan javelin thrower. You familiar with this story? This guy's
Yeah.
amazing. He taught himself. He's silver medalist in the 2016 Olympics, javelin thrower,
Uh-huh.
and he learned on YouTube. You know, the Kenyans are known for their distance running, and he was bound and determined to be successful in the javelin throw. Well, he started watching YouTube videos, and of course, he's probably got a bit of talent to begin with. Guy gets a silver medal, silver medal in the 2016 Olympics in the javelin throw by learning on YouTube videos. So yeah, you don't necessarily need to sit there and go, okay, this is how you hold it, and you don't have to have someone show you in person. And when you throw, you move your hips through. That can be done online, and there's a lot of it. The value in education comes from communicating what worked for you, and if someone can use it the same way, they do. Maybe what works for some javelin coach, maybe his body isn't developed the same way as the other person, but that person who's learning from the other person can try what they did and then adjust it. You know, so it's basically the same concept of what you're talking about. It's a great point. Um, so let's see what is next. Now we're into the future. Um, you mentioned a few tools and strategies and skills. What do you think is, and you mentioned also that when we go back to the new normal, whatever that may be, if we look into the crystal ball, what do you think is going to stick around? What things are we doing now to compensate for this new world? What things are we doing right now that you think we'll continue to do in the future, that we'll stick with, that we will see will work and will continue to use?
Well, I think we're going to use um, um, the digital economy is going to become a reality. Uh,
Hmm.
we have all the tools, but we weren't using them. So, I mean, you're living, you only see it here in Vietnam. The amount of paperwork in a digital world is incredible.
Wow,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So, I think it's very simple. One, we're not quite sure where it's going, but we know it's going to a
Hmm.
new level. So we have to, I think, as I will say, as universities, or just say with universities, they have to look at basically now what is the new way of delivering quality education to students
Hmm.
using technology, so that blended learning has been around, but
Hmm.
now we have to look at the realities of blended learning. So
Hmm.
Brian O'Reilly doesn't have to stand in front of a class lecturing for the students get the online lecture.
Hmm.
Okay, so basically, maybe this is just an example. The students get the online, or you'll meet the students and get it off the ground face to face. You would provide them with the lectures, and maybe at intervals, depending on the structure of the module, you would have some face to face. But
Hmm.
basically, a lot of it is going to be using technology, and I think you have to look at the best blend of face to face and virtual that can be used in whatever situations it is.
Hmm.
But putting students into a classroom to listen to just a pure lecture, I think that's basically finishing. Now,
Yeah.
for the students, they have to take responsibility. So there's no point. And maybe we can look at ways how, I've done some of this myself. I've actually done. I'm certified Franklin Covey Speed of Trust Facilitator. So I had to sit down and go through all of the videos. So I think the responsibility goes back onto the students. You must watch this. but it's a combination of a whole lot of things, including some of face-to-face, that will make a difference. And the business world, the whole world is going to go virtual a lot more now. Why should I have to travel to America? Now, other things, and I'll just go through a few things, and I'm saying this, at a very early stage.
Right.
Opportunities, we'll say, for American students to study in Vietnam. Well, this moving between countries it'll still happen, but what could happen a lot more, and I've already done this years ago at Georgetown University or MIT, is you could be there with your US students in America. I could be here with my Vietnamese students, and we could look at combining online classes, so that now we don't necessarily, the students can listen to the lectures and that, but we could have some sessions that are joint sessions, but we could get the students working on projects.
Of course.
So that the Vietnamese students learn a bit about the Americans and vice versa. So we set up teams that are mixed. And of course, you'd be watching, I know you're not in America, but you could be there with your students and I'd be here with my students. And so I think a lot of people are going to look at those opportunities that we can have more globalization in education, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people have to travel. And for a lot of people, not only in Vietnam, but even in the United States, the possibility of traveling across the world for 3 months is not an option. So, so maybe
it's not for everyone.
No, it's not an option, not for everybody. But we have to start looking at those options of working with foreign institutions in different countries to give the students a lot more exposure to education systems and students from other countries. So
it's a great point.
And I think the technology companies, the various companies are going to see great opportunities here. Of course, it will cost some money, but I think that the how would you say, the dimensions of online teaching will improve dramatically. Where I know it's already here to a certain extent, but where the student can sit there, there can be whiteboards, it can be drawing things, etc., etc. It's there, but and I think we'll move a lot towards a very interactive classroom. As a matter of fact, it's already there. You can have the classroom with everybody in it, and the only thing is that it's actually a sort of a virtual reality classroom. But if a student's sitting there watching, it's technology making the virtual as close to reality as possible.
Yeah, it's an untapped resource, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of opportunities with maxing out the technology. I think we've just scratched the surface, and I think you're going to see a lot more creative individuals. I think it plays to the creative and the curious, which is great. I think that will, rather than hinder innovation, I can see how this would promote it. And like you said, with cross-cultural influences, the technology at our fingertips to communicate more effectively, to use visuals in real time, to bring stats and figures to bear while you're speaking. I think a lot of those things are going to be more and more common as we move forward. So another question. What about, so this is where we are, the next step is going to be, what about the problems that we're facing? How are you going to what is a main problem right now and how are you going to cope with it? You've talked about a few problems. How are you going to cope with these problems? What do you think? Give me one example of a problem and how you're going to tackle it.
Okay. I think the problems are, this is beyond me and my class. I think the problems are the willingness of students, but more importantly, the willingness of academic staff to embrace the new ways of doing things. You've talked about
Motivation.
change, motivation, and people. I am not sure how many staff are willing and able, or to be able to move into this new way of doing things. So basically, one of the big problems, I think, is that we're going to go back. A lot of institutions will go back to traditional once this is over. And I think in the long term, you're going to have, to me, and time will tell, you're going to have the institutions that realize we have to change. We have to take advantage of, not only solve the problems, but take the opportunity. And I think some institutions, well, maybe they don't have the capacity or the attitude, will go back to traditional, and they can find themselves getting left behind very, very quickly, I think. Because
I agree.
One of the things that we need to take into account here is that the next generation that coming through are going to be born with technology. So for them, doing things with technology is as normal as you and I playing cowboys and Indians. We weren't born with this, but they were.
No.
And their expectations would be, they will be a lot more embracing of the technology. So I think the issue would come more from the academic staff, and I think that's where you need to, you summarized it well. There was, after the Lunar New Year, it was obvious we needed to be doing something, and something we should have been starting training people on online learning instead of basically self-training like I did. But it's really, we really need to provide support to the academic staff to be able to move them across. The other issues, and funny enough, this would be more infrastructure issues, is to make sure that that the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, is capable of supporting this, because if more and more people start moving online, it's going to put a bigger, the traffic is going to increase. So you have to have the infrastructure. One of the issues we had was, and this is a local issue, is for me it's okay. I've got my little home office here, so, and it's got, I've got a, the infrastructure is pretty good, but for a lot of people, you don't have the privacy of a room where you can sit down with the computer, and so there's going to be, but I think it's more, the technology is there, and there's going to be huge drive on improving this technology now. And not only for education, I think it's getting people to embrace it. So it's a huge change management thing. Personally, I just looked over the edge of the cliff and I said, Brian, just jump. You have to learn how to do it.
You got to.
Yeah. But that's me, and that's my personality. It doesn't make me any better or worse than anybody else. But other people are maybe have done it traditionally, and I think a lot more has to be done to look at how do we keep the quality of education, but we can make it a lot more economical and still have close to the same country. We don't need the big classrooms. You don't need people traveling. Like, one of the big things which I find was,
but there's there's a huge amount of the economy that's contingent upon that. That's how do we keep growing the economy if everybody stays home? How do we keep growing the economy if people aren't getting on planes and flying to Vietnam or flying to US or flying to Australia? That's the $1 trillion question at the moment, right? How do we grow the economy with people not moving around so much, or people staying in their home without going and buying the cappuccino at the local coffee shop, without going to lunch? They're making coffee at home. They're having their lunch at home. That's what will be interesting, in my opinion, is to see how the economy adjusts to this new normal. How are we going to make money? Is it all going to be, you can't make money on a coffee in a shop if you're doing it from home. That'll be what's an interesting thing. That's a good point.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it's
so for sake of time, I want to move into these are the last two. You mentioned some opportunities. I want to talk about some long-term, some short-term, middle-term, and long-term predictions, and then about possible opportunities to give people some advice, and then finish with your call to action. So, what are your predictions for this next academic year, fall 2020, and then for a year from this outbreak, spring of 2021, and then let's look into the future, the crystal ball for 5 years ahead. Quickly, for sake of time, a quick couple of sentences about this upcoming new academic year, a year from now, and 5 years from now. Where do you see us at those points?
well. I think obviously we don't know when this thing is going to end. So I think in the very short term, we're going to have to look at the contingency plans that we're using now and improving upon them, and
Mm-hmm.
just trying to improve, to fix up problems and improve things so that at least students aren't falling behind too much. So I think that's really the short term.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I think universities in the year after that is to start looking at how to start transitioning from the old to the new. So we might go back to traditional to a certain extent, but it'll be traditional with an eye on the future. This is the way it has to be with universities. In the long term, definitely it has to be. We have to look at how do we use the technology that's here now, and even better technology in the future, to do this. And I think it's very important that universities start making these changes, because if they don't, what's to stop your university in America, hypothetical university,
Mm-hmm.
offering me project management? So
Right.
you can sit at home and do it in a very blended way, in a very interactive way, whatever, using technology. And the bricks and mortar university down the road, I have to drive through traffic, whatever, every day. My buzzword is, if you go back, I don't know when Amazon started, but do we want to be the bookstore, the traditional bookstore, or do we want to? And if we don't do it, there'll be an Amazon or Amazons in education that will come in and they will clean up education. Because
I absolutely agree.
yeah, that's a big prediction, but it's been done in one industry. It can be done in another industry.
Well, and that's something that's interesting. You bring that up, and I've noticed it at my university is Purdue University. They started the online learning, the learning design and technology program 5 years ago, six years ago, I believe. And so they have this bolted down. They have quite a few of their graduates who actually work at Purdue developing online learning for the university. So they're kind of cannibalizing their talent. And it's consequently because these universities have started these online programs, and the universities who started these programs earlier now have this talent pool to plug in to this new reality. And what they're doing is, for example, Purdue University, and I know Stanford University, and several universities in the US, and I'm sure the UK and Australia have done this, but they're moving their summer classes to 100% online. As of May 15th, they don't have any plans of doing in person. They'll make their final decision May 15th at Purdue, but they're looking to doing 100% online for everyone. They started it this semester, this spring semester, communicating to the faculty, hey, you need to be online in 2 weeks. You need to move your classes. And so what this does is it creates this, there was already quite a few instructional designers, which would be kind of the title you would use for what I'm doing, who work with the professors and with the university admin. Okay, this is what we're doing with this class. The professor doesn't know how to do the online. The professor's an expert in their field. The instructional designer has to connect that expertise and the goals of the university and combine that and give it to the students, right? And I know RMIT was hiring a learning futurist, and we're talking about the future, so this 100% relates to what you're talking about. This past fall, they were hiring for that position, which would be the person who would set up a uniform online platform, a learning management system, and help professors like yourself connect your expertise to that learning experience for the learners. And there's a lot of that, which would be my next question is, okay, that's one example. I kind of answered the question for you. Where do you see the future opportunities in the industry? We can go ahead and take that one off the board, the learning futurist or an education technology integration officer, or whatever title you want to use. What are some, this is, again, is a $1 trillion question. Now, it's no longer a billion, we're talking trillions these days. What, give me a couple of examples, aside from the one I just used, what you think might be ways to make it in the future.
You mean as an educational institution?
Well, as an education professional, an education training professional.
Well, I mean, what people could do, I mean, is as individuals. I'll talk more as individuals. I mean, there's what's called the economies of scale. So again, I don't have enough expertise in it, but it's out there. But you could put together a training program, and you could put it up using some platform where when people go in and look at it, then you could get paid so much money. So if you've got a really good program or course or whatever, and it's very popular, well then people, you as an individual, you could make quite a bit of money. I'm sure that it's a bit like people with their blogs and things like that. So I think there's opportunities for individuals as well, as well as institutions of whatever type, to become if you can build up a big following, then you could make money out of things. Well, of course, you've got.
So you're talking about a bit of an online, a bit of marketing component as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Lead. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, basically, what's to stop somebody from creating a really good program online? I mean, you can make it more complex, but I think you'd have to, maybe, like in the Australian system, you can have registered training organizations. So you could set yourself up as a registered training organization. Then you could be allowed to you could get your courses certified. So
Correct.
that if I want to study your course, it's an internationally certified US course. So it's got some standing. Now you might provide the training, the actual training for free, but if I want to get the certificate, I have to pay for it. And this is already happening. So I think at a smaller level, from individuals to small training organizations, there's online is huge. I think for universities, and you're talking about your university, but I would say something that people haven't looked at is that with online, and we never even go into the translating ability of technology, which is improving dramatically.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and that's a left fielder that we haven't taken into consideration, and that's going to be a huge impact. Where if somebody from Vietnam wants to study your course, the translation is so perfect that you don't even have to worry about translating it into Vietnamese, and they don't have to worry about it. Now that's a big game changer.
It'll be real time even.
Yeah, real time. But the thing is, and this is for universities, if I want to get my university degree, say from the US, well, I can do it online. And all I have to do is pay for it. And basically, it means with your market is the world. And I think
Exactly.
I think that changes the whole game, because I'm here with my bricks and mortar university serving local people. What happens? What happens if you're coming in and offering the same modules and basically doing it online?
Exactly.
Who
Yeah.
is my competitor?
Exactly. And Purdue has an actual. They have a two. They have a two different. They have a certificate program online that people can study from anywhere in the world. And this is one thing I worked in with an instructional designer while I was in China. He was trying to get insight. How can I set this up for students from China, considering the Great Firewall, considering the limitations of technology, considering the load on the networks, the load on the servers? What is the peak time? If we're doing anything real time, when will we have limited bandwidth, so on and so forth. So there are again, I think the schools who are moving forward with it are the ones who are going to be ahead of the curve, and there are a lot of them already doing it. There's no need. There is need for brick and mortar. There is need for face to face. But if you're looking, you're right. The market, Arizona University, University of Arizona, Phoenix, has been doing this for years. They have the most enrollment of students in the world, and because they were aggressive with their online learning a decade ago, now they're set up for it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so last question, or not. This isn't actually a question. I guess kind of a question, but what would be your call to action? The best bit of advice you would give to someone in education or training, in particular, we'll stick to your field. You're in higher education. What would be your call to action? Do this to help all of us. What would be something that you would suggest for an education training professional to do to help the greater good of the industry, the greater good of the profession?
I think the best thing anybody can do is to become as competent as they can in delivering quality education. For most, that probably means that we have to learn how to use new and different technology, but we have to adapt. So I would say, for me, with project management, I've got lots of knowledge, I've got lots of experience, I've got the attitude. So whilst I do have to keep up on technical aspects of it, that's just part that goes along naturally. I'm a project management professional. However, I need to look at how can I improve on the delivery of this knowledge base to people. And to me, what is quite obvious is that we talked about digitalization, industry education 4.0, but we now have to live it. And
Right.
that's what I would say to people. You have to
Okay.
now, technology is only tools, but these tools can be used a lot better by us to deliver to the our perspective, our students. So
Well, I can't. I have a reason for not being able to agree with you more than that. My main, of course, motivation for agreeing with you is that this is what I'm studying, and this is luckily when this started happening, I was like, wow, everybody's going to online learning, and I'm getting a master's degree in distance learning and technology integration. This is the silver lining to all this is that, yeah, and that's exactly what the person in my position is that go-between. Experts like yourself need to get the information out. You have all the hard parts done, the experience, the trial and error, making mistakes and overcoming those mistakes, change management, making it through the hard times, and all this experience. Now you need to communicate that, and you need to get that knowledge over into the minds of the people who will be basically you're handing the baton to them. So I agree with you 100% that we have all this skill laying around and we have all this technology laying around, but because we're a little bit lazy, not any one particular individual, I'm saying as a species, if there's no sense of urgency, we're not going to really move to that harder that little bit of a difficult way. Oh, I don't want to, I'll learn that tomorrow, I'll learn that later. Well, now we have to, and now we have to connect all this information and knowledge laying around with all this amazing technology and find out what works. And it might be a different technology toolbox that our MIT uses as opposed to Purdue or Stanford or Cambridge or whatever university. But I agree with you. There needs to be that we're disconnected. This reservoir of information and knowledge and this reservoir of tools, and we've got to find out what fits. And it'll be interesting to see what lasts, what people, you know, if we are truly like I was saying, a bit lazy, what is going to be the low-hanging fruit? What are the technology? You know, you see a lot of people using Zoom, right? But it's free, but they're going to take all your data, right? They're gonna, or it's not. It's in, you know, there's a price for it being. Well, what's the cost of free? The old sales term, sales phrase. So yeah, it's interesting, and you know, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Brian, that's all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or any other quick comment you'd like to make before we sign off?
No, thank you very much. And obviously, keep in contact with me.
Of course.
And I'd love to hear how it's all going. Okay.
Yeah, of course. And I want to thank you. A huge thank you. You've taken a little more time than we allotted. I appreciate your patience. You know, change management, I'm learning how to use a new tool. And I want to thank you again for taking the time and for sharing your reservoir of knowledge and your experience with the world. So thank you.
Okay. Before, I was just going to say, we can close off on the recording.
Okay. I'll turn the recording off. Stop recording. Stop recording this meeting.